Hey, Chicago Fire and Major League Soccer fans. This is Nick back with the Feed the Fire podcast. We've got a lot of catching up to do. It's been about a week since I put out our last episode, and a lot has happened in a week of Chicago Fire news. We've got updates on Neymar. We've got updates on new signings. We've got updates on players being transferred out. There is a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it. Earlier today, Monday, January 27th, Fabrizio Romano confirmed that Neymar will be returning to Santos, his youth club in Brazil. Al Hilal have terminated Neymar's contract with immediate effect, as Romano reports, as the Brazilian will now travel for medical and sign in as a new Santos player. So we know that Chicago had the exclusive rights in MLS to negotiate with Neymar and Al Hilal. We know that Neymar wanted to keep as much of that money as possible, but now it looks like the contract's being terminated. He is moving to Al Hilal. I don't know if that is considered a buyout, if he is going to be getting any of that money that he's owed, or if he triggered some sort of for-cause termination that his club was able to use. We'll see if all that comes out in the future reporting and what the deal with Santos is going to entail. But for the time being, he is going to be a player at Santos. Now, where this kind of hampers some of the Chicago Fire speculation is that the Fire fans kind of thought, well, he'll be a free agent in the summer. If he just goes out on loan to Santos, or if that club decided not to give him an extension, whatever the case may be. But the fact that Al Hilal terminated his contract, he will be negotiating a new contract with Santos, and I doubt it's going to allow for him to become a free agent within the next 6 months to a year, even probably 2 years or so. So it looks like he will not be coming to the Chicago Fire or MLS probably at all. If he doesn't come within the next year or two, probably not going to be coming at all, because I don't think he'll have that same pull, that same global reach that he does in this moment right now. And he lost a little bit of it because he hasn't played hardly at all in the last year due to being in Saudi Arabia and due to being injured, more so the injury, but the exposure of him being in Saudi Arabia isn't there as much. So he will not have the same bargaining power and star power behind his name should he try to come to MLS in the future. And you know what? At that point, if everything's going right for the Chicago Fire, they probably won't be needing him to get them into playoff contention and trophy contention if Berhalter's plan in the short term works out. I would have liked to see Neymar here. I would have liked to have him come sign with the Chicago Fire. And a lot of people have taken the anti-position, would argue with me about that. And that's fine. I think that's one of the fun things about having these high-profile players, maybe at a little bit of the advanced stage in their career, being talked about as coming to your MLS club. So I would have liked to see him here. I know he would have had an immediate impact on the club in many different ways, but I like the ambition. And even more so, I like the fact that the Fire didn't put all their eggs in the Neymar basket. They have been doing so many more deals over the course of this offseason, over the course of or getting ready for the transfer window to officially open at the end of the month. I think it would be I think we have to give credit to Greg Berhalter and his new front office for pursuing Neymar, but also at the same time having all these other things in line. Now, one thing I am going to question, it's funny, I think of it as comedians and musicians, how when they put out their first album or they do their first stand-up set and special, they've had their entire lives to create material to that point. And the hardest thing for them to do is then put out the follow-up album, put out the follow-up set, write some new jokes, because they're essentially starting over. I am interested to see what Berhalter and his staff are going to do in the summer window, and then next winter, 1 year from now, if they still have all these new players and connections and great ideas to be pulling in. Like, Sam Rogers, someone who Greg knew from his time with the usmnt. Sam Rogers getting that one call up. Berhalter's like, shoot, I need center back depth. I know I can call Sam Rogers and see what he's up to. Is he going to have used up all the numbers in the Rolodex so to speak, over his first year, or will he continue to build it out? So that's something to keep an eye on as well. I think he'll be fine. He's got enough connections in the soccer world, literally around the world, especially with his coaching staff. But just something to kind of keep an eye on to see if they're going to start having to really, I don't want to say scraping the bottom of the barrel because I don't want to insult players like that, but he's going to have to really be working his network in the future. But speaking of Berhalter, he did have a press conference last week that was broadcast by Chicago Fire social media. He was also not joined by, but also Jack Elliott appeared on the press conference. Just a few quick highlights. Berhalter was very pleased with his performance, with the team's performance against Fortaleza. He was saying this is them coming in for preseason against the Fortaleza team who's played together for a while, and not just the Chicago Fire preseason, but essentially a brand new team altogether. Very few guys. I think they've turned over more than half the roster since Berhalter took over. So he was very pleased with their performance and seeing the team start to come together. He did say Federico Navarro is likely going to be sold, and we have confirmation on that now. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the other highlights from his press conference is that they are going to be signing another midfielder, and we did get that announcement. We'll be talking about the Kouamé signing shortly. Also, he confirmed that they are shopping Arnaud Souquet around. They're not sure if they'll use the buyout on him, but they are trying to work with the player to find a good spot for him. He was also very happy to see how well Brian Gutierrez performed with the USMNT. So who is this midfielder that Greg Berhalter referenced that they would be signing? The Chicago Fire have acquired midfielder Rominigue Kouame on loan from Spanish club Cadiz in La Liga. And I'm sure this is old news by now, but let's go through it. Let's talk a little bit more about the player himself as well. So the Chicago Fire press announcement explained that back on January 24th, it feels like forever ago, just 3 days ago, that the club has acquired midfielder Rominigue Kouame. Got to get the pronunciation right. It's on the guide there. He is on loan from Spanish La Liga 2 side Cadiz for the 2025 MLS season with an option to purchase. I believe Cadiz was just recently relegated. Kouame will occupy an international spot on the roster pending receipt of his visa and international transfer certificate. We're excited to welcome Rominigue to the Fire, said Chicago Fire FC Director of Football and Head Coach Greg Berhalter. His addition brings another dimension to our midfield and strengthens the team in a key area. With his qualities and experience competing in elite European leagues like La Liga and Ligue 1, Ligue 1, we're confident Rominigue will make an immediate impact and help us achieve our goals this season. So that's Berhalter's statement. And yeah, he's bringing in someone with competition and experience in high-level European leagues, which is great to raise that level of the Chicago Fire. You know, if you look at the past, who have been kind of the leaders on the team, yeah, you had Rafa Chihos, a guy who's played in the Bundesliga before, but when you're at the center back position, you're kind of there again. Your primary mission is to defend. Your primary mission is not to help elevate the play of the others on the field. But so if you were looking at your midfielders from last season, you had Haile Selassie, who was in Switzerland. You had Gutierrez, who's a homegrown. You had Fabian Herbers, who spent a chunk of his career here in Major League Soccer. You had Chris Mueller. You had Ari Lassiter. You had guys whose ceilings were Major League Soccer. Kellen Acosta, of course, being the USMNT player that he is, probably could have played overseas if he'd wanted to, but still, that caliber of player is no longer raising the level of play within the Chicago Fire, and that's one of the reasons why they went out and got Kouame. So what does the new player have to say? A lot of what we've been hearing. He says, I'm excited to join the Fire and be part of this ambitious project. After learning more about the team's vision, it was clear that this is the right place for me. I look forward to contributing on the field, connecting with the fans, and helping the club achieve its goals this season. End quote. So again, we're hearing more new players talk about the vision of the club, the ambitious project, what they're building, what they're doing here. And I absolutely love it. So the press release continues that Kouame, 28 years old, joins the Fire after featuring in 218 matches in various competitions across Africa and Europe, including appearances in Ligue 1 in France, La Liga, and the Belgian Pro League. Kouamé began his professional career in 2014 at AS Real Bamako of the Malian First Division before moving to Europe in 2016. In France, he featured for Lille, Paris FC, Troyes, and also was on loan to Cercle Bruges in Belgium. While at Troyes, Kouamé played over 100 matches, including 66 appearances in Ligue 1, with 5 goals and 7 assists. He spent 8 years in France before signing with Cadiz in Spain, making his La Liga debut with them in 2023. He's had 31 appearances for that match, 16 in La Liga, 2 in Copa del Rey, and 13 in La Liga 2. Now, he was born in the Ivory Coast, but is of Malian descent and represents Mali at the international level. He has 11 caps for Mali, including 6 in the African Nations Championship and 4 FIFA World Cup qualifying matches, as well as an international friendly. So the guy's got experience at many different levels, and he's going to continue to gain experience, I'm sure, at the international level there, not only increasing his value should the Fire ever want to sell him. Though, what did he say? He's 28 and he's on loan. So I don't know how much a transfer value a 28-year-old midfielder is going to have overseas, but the fact remains that there might be a club who would want to pick him up on a short-term deal or something from the Chicago Fire, depending if they exercise the purchase option and give him an extension. I do like the fact that he is on loan because the Chicago Fire are starting to build up that midfield base a little bit. And this also gives them the flexibility to go out and possibly sign a designated player midfielder within the next year or so without committing to a contract for Kouamé. Hopefully he performs extremely well and that the Fire are forced to have to choose between him and a potential designated player or high-level player. Just a couple stats on Kouamé. 5'8", 165 pounds, born December 17th, 1996. Gosh, it pains me to read those 1990 birthdays. Now let's look a little bit more about the history of the player here. So looking on fbref.com, we look at his career stats here as he's played through the domestic leagues. His best season probably came in the 2021-2022 season, or actually the 2020-21 season with Troyes, where they won League 2 and earned promotion to League 1. He started 31 matches that promotion season, and then in League 1 started 34 matches and then 31 matches after that. So that's a really good run of form that he had there. However, they were relegated down to League 2, and that's when he transferred to Cadiz, where he has only made 17 starts in 2 seasons at Cadiz. And I'm saying Cadiz, it's probably pronounced Cadiz. If I'm getting the accent wrong, apologies there. But so he hasn't been getting the playing time, so this is a perfect opportunity for him now to really assert himself and maybe earn back a little bit more of that reputation at Cadiz. Looking at his scouting report, again, still on FBref, they do a great job of kind of comparing him and ranking him players in percentiles against others of the same position. So this is compared to midfielders. And just so you know, with FBref, they have different categories of midfielders. There's midfielders, there's wingers, there's attacking mids, there's defensive mids. So this, we're just looking at those players that are qualified as midfielders, and where he stands out, it's not for his goal scoring. He is not a goal scorer, or at least hasn't been in that role in his career so far. In fact, if we look back at some of his stats, like the most goals he's ever had in a season is 2. That year they got promoted, he had 2 goals and 3 assists back in 2020, 2021. So that is not his game. He is a creating type of a player. He's got high pass completions, winning aerial duels, advancing the ball on the dribble. Like, that is where he progresses. That is where he is going to shine as a player, progressing the ball forward. He's also a decent defensive midfielder as well, with a high score in interceptions. And if you're looking at some of the comparable players here, we're looking at Boubacar Soumare of Sevilla. We're looking at Omar Mascarell of Mallorca, Fernando of Sevilla, Idrissou Baba of Almeria, and Gené of Getafe. So those are kind of the comparable players that FBref thinks when they think of Rominigue Kouame. Again, a lot of those guys in La Liga as well. So decent comparisons there. So that's who we're getting, and that's hopefully who's going to be the complement to Brian Gutierrez. Hopefully we can get Kellen Acosta to kind of be that main defensive midfielder, allowing Kouame and Gutierrez to focus on the attack, to really work some combination play with the new wingers, as well as get the ball, progress it upfield. Hopefully with a bit of a rebuilt backline, they won't have to be dropping back into too much of a defensive formation. But with Kouame standing out as far as his interception numbers go, he could be able to maybe play alongside Kellen Acosta. I'd like to see him pushing up a little bit more, but he could be playing alongside Kellen Acosta, which would be great then to spring Gutierrez or any of the other attackers on the counterattack. All right, let's see. What other notes do I have on this one? So we've got Zinkernagel, Bamba, Kouame aren't necessarily known for their goal scoring, which makes me think that Kuipers is going to be even more the focal point of the offense, or maybe it does allow Zinkernagel to get in on the goal scoring. He did have one in a preseason match. But hey, if you got $5 to throw around, not that I like to tell you how to invest, but if you got $5, maybe throw it on Kuipers as your dark horse golden boot winner here, because he very well could have 20 goals this season when you have all of these players who are not primary goal scorers, but looking to create for their teammates. Berhalter is going to have to unlock the wingers to contribute with their own goals, though. It's the only way you win. You can't have just one goal scorer in MLS. You've got to have that secondary goal scorer, someone who's going to pitch in another 10 goals, or a couple 3 guys who are going to pitch in 6, 7, 8 goals each throughout the course of the season. Hopefully we see Gutierrez take a step up. Last season, he said his goal was 15 goal contributions. I think he hit maybe double-digit goals and assists, but hopefully he can hit that 15 goal contribution number here, maybe 7 or 8 goals and another 7 or 8 assists, and then get Zinkernagel, Bamba, and Kouame also contributing those similar numbers with Kuipers 20 goals up top. I think the Chicago Fire could be poised for probably middle of that playoff picture, 6 to 8. I know I did a recent interview. Go check things out on Twitter, where I answered some Q&A from another MLS podcast over. It's MLS Elliott at MLS ELI. And I said, I think the Fire is still going to finish between 8 and 10 just because they haven't proven to be any better. But if everything breaks their way, if Berhalter gets these wingers going, if he gets these new signings going, and if Kuipers is that 20-goal guy, then we could see the Chicago Fire in probably around that 5 or 6 spot in the Eastern Conference. And maybe that's just me feeling in a good mood. I don't know. A little under the weather last week, feeling much better now. Maybe it's coming through here. All right, moving on to our next topic. Speaking of player signings, the Fire have also added to the organization's depth with a new homegrown signing. The Fire have signed 15-year-old academy product Robert Turdean to a club record homegrown deal. And this is a big deal because of not just the size of the contract, which I don't believe has been reported. However, the fact that it is the largest one in club history and the second largest homegrown deal in MLS, only behind Kevin Sullivan, shows that the Fire not only have this great talent in Turdean that they really do believe in, but also the fact that they're willing to invest in their homegrowns, in their academy players. This is them backing up all the talk that they have made since Berhalter has taken over and since he's hired and brought in all this front office staff and people on the sporting side of things. Everyone's been saying, we want homegrowns to be playing. We want 5 guys to be on that first team roster week in and week out by the time we're done with this project, right? And that's fantastic. And now they're investing in it. And, the Fire are kind of already there almost, if you think you've got Pineda and Gutierrez and Brady. Mueller isn't considered a homegrown, but he is from the area and did play his youth club here with Sockers FC. So honestly, if they had a better network back at that time, you could have potentially 4 homegrowns if you count Mueller on it. And then of course we've got Sergio Orejel as well, who's on the roster. So the potential is there, but the Fire don't want those guys to be, just the flash in the pan, the quote unquote golden generation of homegrowns. They need it to be sustainable. And this signing of Turdean shows the investment. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're going to continue that that investment and that desire to bring homegrowns up to the first team. So here is the press release on the Chicago native becoming the youngest field player signing in club history. Chicago Fire have announced they have signed Chicago native and midfielder Robert Turdean to a club record contract for a homegrown player. His contract, which also ranks as the second largest deal for a homegrown player in MLS history, will run through the 2028 season with club options for 2029 and 2030. So that does seem like a very long time for a contract, but he's 15 years old when he signed it. So give him another 6 seasons and they'll probably give him another extension. But also, you have to think that there are some roster rules that come into play here, because once you sign 2 homegrown deals, I think you're done. That's it. You can't sign a third homegrown deal. You have to get a senior MLS deal at that point. And that's on a sidebar here. Chris Brady has been asking for a raise. He hasn't been demanding it or making any sort of, diva plays, but he has asked for a raise. He was one of the most affordable goalkeepers in all of MLS, by far outperforming his contract, but I don't think they can sign him to another homegrown deal. I think he's already signed his 2 homegrown deals with the club, so now they have to pay the man. He deserves it, of course, but that could come into play at the end of his contract, which I think is at the end of this season. So they're going to have to try and do something with Chris Brady's contract situation to make sure that they're still rewarding him for his play, incentivizing him and paying him for future performance, but also making sure that they're working within their salary cap restrictions as well, because I think he's done with his homegrown deals. But anyway, that's another consideration for giving Robert Turdean a longer homegrown contract initially. That way they can get him on another homegrown contract when he's 21, and then you do that for 3-4 years, and then he's in his prime when they're ready to sign him to a full senior contract or maybe make a transfer, whatever the case may be. And so now let's hear from the head coach and director of football, Greg Berhalter. We're very pleased to sign Robert to a club record contract for a homegrown player. His growth within our academy has been impressive, and we believe he has a very high ceiling. His decision to choose the Fire over major European clubs speaks volume about the environment we're building and our commitment to developing local talent. We're excited to continue supporting his development as he takes the next steps in his career. End quote. So I didn't realize there were European clubs that were interested in him. It doesn't surprise me, considering he's been playing with the U.S. Youth National Team, as well as traveling with the Fire Academy around the country and around the world. So it's not surprising, but it is great to see him making his commitment to his hometown club. I'm sure some of the financial incentive has to do with it. There's a reason they're giving him the second largest deal. It's not all just to show that they're putting their money where their mouth is, but they do need to retain the talent. So I think that's a great move. And honestly, whatever they're paying him, if he continues to develop on the trajectory that they are projecting, then they're going to make it back, whether it's on the field performance or in a transfer fee. So now let's hear from the player himself and what he has to say. Signing my first professional contract with the Fire is a dream come true, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity, said Turdean. I want to thank my family, coaches, and teammates who've supported me along the way. I'm excited to continue growing with the Fire and will work hard every day to make the club and the city of Chicago proud. I can't wait to get started and contribute to the team's future success, end quote. Now, Turdean becomes the 26th homegrown player and the second youngest overall signing in club history. The only other younger signing, former keeper Gaga Slonina, who was 14 years, 297 days when he signed. That's incredible to think. I don't even remember what I think I was playing like with my local club in Dyer when I was 14 years old, trying to get good enough to get on the high school team. The Fire currently have 7 homegrown players under contract with the first team. So there you go. They are close to meeting their goal of getting 5 guys rostered for game day and being able and ready to contribute on the first team. Justin Reynolds, I forgot about Justin Reynolds. He's also a guy that could be contributing as a homegrown player on the first team and who already has been. Let's see anything else about Robert Turdean we need to know here. He's won multiple accolades as a member of the Fire Academy, which he joined at 11 years old. He played a key role in their U15 MLS Next Cup championship just this last year. The club won their second national title in MLS Next and 4th overall championship. He had 2 goals in that championship game against the Galaxy Academy. And at the international level has represented the US U15 men's youth national team on 3 occasions. So he is no stranger to high levels of competition. And here are his stats. He's 5'7", 135, birth date January 14th, 2010. Oh my gosh, that's just making my head spin talking about that. He is from Niles, Illinois. Hey, my mom grew up in Niles. What do you know? And his actual citizenship, he has dual citizenship, U.S. and Romanian. So there's a potential for him to maybe get that European passport and move overseas, making him even more valuable for a lot of clubs interested in him. So congratulations to Robert on his contract, and congrats to the club for locking up such a phenomenal young talent. Now, those are the players in. Let's talk about the players out. Some news, as previously speculated and hinted at by Greg Berhalter last week, the Chicago Fire have transferred midfielder Federico Navarro to Club Atlético Rosario Central in Argentina. Just yesterday, the 26th, they have announced they have made this transfer for an undisclosed fee. This opens a U22 initiative slot on the roster, and Chicago will retain a percentage of a future transfer fee. Per the club policy, additional terms were not disclosed. Berhalter says, "We'd like to thank Fedi for his service and contributions to the club. This gives Fedi the opportunity to return to his family and home country. This transfer is in the best interest of both the player and the club, and we wish Fedi and his family all the best for the future." So remembering Fede Navarro, he was acquired via transfer from Club Atlético Talleres in Argentina back in 2021. He is only 24 years old now, so still got a long career ahead of him. He ended up with 70 appearances and 60 starts in 4 years for the Fire and was named their Defensive Player of the Year in 2021. And that is as much his good play, but also as much of how bad the team was in 2021. He spent the entirety of his career prior to joining the Fire in Argentina. Has played at the U19 level for the national team there. And that's all the notes on the transfer out of Fede Navarro. Now, it's been speculated that his transfer fee was around $5 million, which some people are saying, oh my gosh, that's an amazing fee for Fede Navarro. This guy was not good. This was his worst season with the Fire. We still got $5 million for him. But the counterpoint to that is, even if it is $5 million, that is the Fire just kind of recouping what they paid for him. They didn't make money off this deal. They definitely didn't make money in the sense that he performed so well on the pitch for them. So it was kind of like a break-even-ish kind of a deal, and possibly they even lost a little money on it to make the move. But whatever you think about the business side of this deal, it was time for Federico Navarro to move on. He had a lot of the potential in that, I kind of saw him as like a poor man's Diego Chara, the Portland Timbers defensive midfielder. If all things worked out perfectly for Navarro, that's what he would have turned into. He would have turned into Timbers Diego Chara, or Chara, however you want to pronounce it, or however he pronounces it the proper way. He would have been that ball-winning midfielder, that destroyer in the midfielder, and then springing that counterattack, the guy that just hustled constantly for 90 minutes and would just continually wear out the opposing team. What we instead saw from Fede Navarro was a lack of development throughout the course of his time here at the Chicago Fire, partly because of him as a player, and partly because of the continuous turnover of the coaching staff and the lame duck staff from last season that really had no direction, no connection with these players. And now you've got Berhalter comes in and probably wants the roster flexibility. I'm sure he wants the roster flexibility to go sign another U22 player, but also maybe doesn't want to work on a project central defensive midfielder. Additionally, we have seen the problems with Fede Navarro and his what do I want to call it? His skill at getting ridiculous yellow cards. Maybe it's the name. We remember Miguel Navarro with all his ridiculous yellows. Maybe it's the Navarro name. I don't know. They're not related as far as I know. So, but he did pick up some silly yellows. I'll never forget last season. I think he was a halftime sub. Immediately came on and started yelling at the ref, and then got a yellow card before they even blew the whistle. Or like within the first minute of a second half. Like, you've been on the pitch for a minute. I don't even think he had a touch on the ball. Or maybe his first touch was a foul and then was just chirping at the ref the whole time. And he ended up getting a yellow card. It was absolutely ridiculous. again, he lost a lot of his self-control. He needed a mentor, either as a player or coaching staff, someone to guide him, to take that energy and passion and turn it into productive play on the field and not reckless challenges and tackles. And because you did see him get very, very frustrated, and opposing teams recognized that. And when they needed something to break their way, they would go after Fede Navarro, get him to commit silly fouls. He was always good for a yellow card. And then he was always having to either be subbed off or play very, very timid, so he didn't get the red. There were times he did get the red. So as much of a raw talent as Navarro was, it never developed, and he never, I think, got in the right mindset to be a professional player in MLS. Wish him well, but this is a positive development for the club, and hopefully by bringing in a guy like Kouamé, that they can quickly replace and move forward from Fede Navarro. Honestly, I'd love to see Mauricio Pineda maybe get some minutes as a defensive midfielder and see maybe he can play well with Kouamé and Acosta, or filling in now that Gaston Jimenez is gone as well. Maybe Pineda will be that third choice defensive mid and third choice center back. Also, player on the outs. Nothing official yet, but Arnaud Souquet is definitely on the outs with Greg Berhalter. Again, there's nothing official, but he was not included with the team when they went down to Florida to train. There was a nice little social media joke going around where the team gave new signing Leo Barroso Souquet's number 2 jersey to wear, and Souquet goes on the club's social media and says, "I didn't know they'd given away my number 2, or I didn't know I'd lost my number 2." And people were like, "Oh yeah, that's like not blocking your wife when your girlfriend's posting on your account kind of a situation here." The club's moved on, and they didn't really tell Souquet, "Hey, we're moving on here." But honestly, if he's surprised by that, I think that's really on him and maybe his agent, because everything that I've read and seen is that the Fire had been in open communication with Souquet, that he's not in the future of the club, that they're trying to move him, that they're shopping him around. So I don't know why he would be so surprised that his number got reassigned to another player. And I don't know if he's worn the number 2 throughout his career, but the fact that he's only been with the Fire for, was it only 2 years, year and a half? I forget exactly now, because the last 2 years have been very, very mediocre at best and have all kind of blurred together. So I don't know if he's been here that long. I think it's only been a year, so I don't know how attached he is to that number. But the fact remains that the club is trying to move on. He does not fit in with Berhalter and what Berhalter was building, I should say. I don't know if they get along personally or not, but you gotta feel for the guy that he's kind of in this limbo, that he's in this no man's land of, well, my current club doesn't want me, but no other club wants me enough to sign me or trade for me, or whatever the case may be. Now, maybe there are some other clubs either in MLS or back home in France who are just waiting for the Chicago Fire to use a buyout on him so they can get him as a free agent rather than with a transfer fee. But if that's the case, I imagine the Chicago Fire would be willing to have a little lesser of a transfer fee if they're going to just end up using a buyout on him anyway. Or other clubs are just playing hardball and waiting to see what they can get for Souquet on a free transfer. As we know, the new rules that have been put into effect immediately in MLS allow for a second contract buyout. So the Fire had used one with Gaston Jimenez. If I recall the terms of that deal, even though they kind of mutually parted because there was some money left on the table that he was entitled to, that the Fire had to give him with that mutual parting, whatever the case may be, that did have to technically count as a buyout. So now they can use their second one here on Souquet. I think they are trying to move him. People are speculating that they want to move Souquet with a transfer and use a buyout on a player like Mueller, or if they can't move Mueller, use the buyout on Souquet. But regardless of that speculation, Souquet is on the outs, and I would not expect to see him suited up for the Chicago Fire in the 2025 season. That's all the Chicago Fire talk. That's it. That's all the Chicago Fire talk, right? 4 different players that we talked about, as well as the Neymar rumors put to bed. So that was really good conversation here. So just a few other things I want to go over real quickly. We had the USMNT friendlies. We got to see Brian Gutierrez appear in both of those games. The breakout player in those two games, though, was Patrick Agyemang, the Charlotte FC striker. Keep an eye on him. He had 2 goals in those 2 games, and he is someone who can definitely put the ball in the back of the net in MLS. He kind of reminds me of the Daryl Dike type, just a huge strike force of a man there at the front of the formation. And if he has a really good MLS season, who's to say that he can't jump ahead of Jesus Ferreira, Josh Sargent, or Haji Wright in the USMNT depth pool? The other story, of course, Diego Luna having his nose broken, going back in the game, and then getting the assist on his very next touch, and then getting subbed out at halftime. So kudos to Diego Luna. He's definitely earned some respect from the USMNT fan base and from the coaching staff. It was Mauricio Pochettino who post-game said that Diego Luna had couple big balls on him. So pardon the language there, but that was the quote. One other thing, big picture MLS that has been released that we kind of missed throughout the course of all the Chicago Fire dealings is that MLS Next, the third tier in MLS, you got MLS, you have MLS Next Pro, and you have MLS Next, have announced a new competition tier. And this announcement was back on January 9th. So starting in September of 2025, clubs in the MLS Next program will compete in regular season games, regional tournaments, and various national events, as well as coaching development and education programs, talent identification, and high performance opportunities. MLS Next is the elite platform for youth development in North America, currently with 151 member clubs and over 16,000 players. And this new announcement, this new expansion, will provide opportunities for thousands of additional players and coaches, allowing member clubs greater flexibility to align team travel and scheduling, optimize player pools more effectively, and allocate resources. So essentially, they're expanding the MLS network to have more affiliations and more ties within the MLS scouting network as well. So the MLS Next operators include the National Academy League, which is run by Three Step Soccer, the Elite Academy League, the Sporting Development League, Cobalt Sports, and Cal North Soccer Association. So I'm not familiar with a lot of those operators or those different leagues, but that is, I guess, essentially your divisions or conferences within MLS Next. That's my assumption there. And because now they are expanding this particular tier, clubs will participate in one of 8 regional tournaments each season, in addition to the option for eligible age groups to attend MLS Next Fest in December. Those regional tournaments serve as qualifying for MLS Next Cup in the following year in 2026. So they are expanding the number of clubs in MLS Next Net. You will have more tournament opportunities. You have more resource sharing. You have more access to the pro pathway now as a result of it. And so you have a greater recruiting net for MLS clubs. A lot of people are saying, what are you going to do without the development academy? That went away. Well, here it is. It was always MLS Next, and now it is to replace the development academies. Now it's expanding even further. The skeptics out there, I think, are going to say that this is MLS trying to kill every other soccer development out there. But I think the best thing is you want to cast a wider net. Like, they want to be able to identify and have within their reach, within their network, within their scouting, as many youth players as possible. I don't think this is MLS trying to kill other clubs by monopolizing recruiting and scouting in youth soccer. I think it is just trying to cast a wider net. So that's kind of the point and counterpoint to it. But the fact of the matter is, these youth players will be able to participate in more competitions, in more competitive environments, have better resources, as well as have more access to MLS clubs and academies. The best players we still are seeing getting scouted by European clubs. There's still the Barca Residency Academy in Arizona, I believe. Again, we've seen Robert Turdean, who has interest in European clubs because of his time with the U.S. youth national team. There was another young player from New York City's academy who just signed a deal with Man City. So, there's still those types of highest quality players that are being scouted, but now it is developing the academy system in the second teams that is going to take a large step forward as a result of this expansion in MLS Next. And with that, I think you've heard enough of me, and I think I am done talking for the night. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to the Believe Network for hosting us. Looking forward to continuing to cover the Chicago Fire signings as they continue their preseason. I think they're off to California if they're not already there to start the Coachella Invitational. I believe that kicks off on February 2nd. So please make sure you're liking, subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing the show. And as always, let's go fire.